David Clark, the Reverend Doctor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I know that they were eager on their government benches to hear my contribution, so I shall not disappoint. I have moved that there be a change to the bill that would ensure that this Kickstarter contribution is not withdrawn until 2018, and that would allow a future Labor government to make sure that this continued as it is now, because this is a government that is determined to take from New Zealand's future in order to pay for their mismanagement today. It's a government with no plan. They've got their heads down opposite. They know it's true. They are trying here to take $1,000 off future generations, of 500,000 Kiwis in the next 4 years. That's what they're doing here with this bill. Make no mistake if you're watching this at home. They are taking $1,000 off 500,000 Kiwis for their retirement savings because they haven't managed the economy well, because they have failed to get to surplus, and because they're trying to make it look like they haven't missed by too much. Actually, the books are $1 billion worse than they were last budget. They are doing an appalling job of managing the economy. They have failed in good times to diversify the economy. So my amendment, Mr. Chair, would push out the date that it started so that a Labor government in future could fix this before it actually takes effect. That's the effect of my amendment. Now, if we look at how it stands now, and it's here in the explanatory note, the general policy statement on the front of the bill, and people at home may not have this in front of them, but the way that, or they might, there's some who will, but if they don't, I will explain that what this bill attempts to do is retrospective legislation, so that when the budget was announced at 2 p.m. on Thursday, that was the cut-off point. That was the cut-off point. If people hadn't signed up until that point, they were not eligible to get the Kickstarter anymore. Why did they make it retrospective? Why are they passing legislation now after that time to take effect a few days ago? It's because they know in their heart of hearts that this incentive works. That if people really wanted to sign up to this program just because it was so, that they would have done it anyway, that the incentive really matters is something that they try to deny, but they know that if they made this scheme start a little later, people will be rushing out there to sign it up. And then there's also an amendment in the name of Chris Hipkins, which I expect he will speak to on that front, that allows for people who might be watching at home saying, gosh, I wish I'd got that $1,000 to go out and sign up in the next few months. It's a sensible amendment. If they really believed that that wasn't going to be the effect of this legislation, if they really believed that $1,000 would make no difference, they would accept Chris Hipkins' amendment, and they would accept my amendment, which allows that $1,000 to continue. My amendment is really targeted at the artificial surplus they're creating, because this is a budget without vision, because this budget is one that fails to meet the government's promise of a surplus, their central promise in their last election campaign. This says we will continue with this very good scheme until a future Labor government can correct it. So, Mr. Chair, that is why I am moving an amendment in clause 2 of the bill. And as it currently stands, it would come into force, as I'd said, the moment the budget was announced. Now, we know that this will have an effect, and we also know that the changes they're proposing are going to cost taxpayers. So we would obviate that cost with my clause. The extra $210,000 that they currently estimate it would cost to change the IRD tax system to take this money away from future kids, $210,000 to take the money away from future kids would be avoided. And let's think about that. That's 210 kids' starts in life that are paid for out of just avoiding this change. 210. They spend the money frivolously on government administration because they're scampering for the surplus. It was a panic response. We know that. We've heard that in the previous debate because it's right there in the government's own departmental statements. So it's important for the reason that it avoids cost. It avoids cost to the IRD. It avoids cost to the taxpayer by flow-on effect. That $210,000 can be avoided. And I would think that members opposite would consider it important to take into account how New Zealand taxpayer money was spent. Now, there is another reason why it is so important that this bill is pushed out. Because, Mr. Chair,
James Shaw. I would like to speak to the commencement